one among equals. If this race boils down to be one about the economy, I don't think there's any question Obama will win this thing. If it's about image, about Palin, about McCain, and about Obama, if it's about personalities, then I think McCain may have an edge, in spite of what you may or may not think about Palin. I want to say a word about media. This term "new media" is important to this campaign. And when people use the term "new media," what they're referring to is everything from cable television, which is a 24/7 operation, to the use of the internet, to even downloading video from YouTube and other sources. One thing we know about cable is that it is an animal that has to be fed. To be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, means it has to have something new to say as often as it possibly can. And so because of that, we hear about stuff that you won't necessarily, that won't necessarily make it to the nightly news. And you'll hear it first on cable, and it will already be discussed in probably a plus and minus way. You've got to have a Democratic strategist, and you've got to have a Republican strategist. So when John McCain says the economy is fundamentally strong, you'll have the Democrats saying this guy doesn't know beans about anything. Anyone who has bought gas in the last month knows that the economy is not strong, or seeing what's happened on Wall Street. The Republican will say, you didn't finish the quote. He said what he really meant was the strength of the American worker. So you have to hear this back and forth. Did she favor the bridge to nowhere before she was against the bridge to nowhere? So there's a debate, we have to hear all of that stuff. Does she know what the Bush doctrine is? Can she see Russia from her house? I was listening, I think it was NPR this morning, had McCain on, and they asked McCain, do you really think when she says that Russia is close to Alaska that gives her foreign policy credentials? And he said, that wasn't what she meant. She's an expert on foreign policy, he said. When Obama says something about Pennsylvanians being bitter over the economy and their recourse is to guns and to religion, we have to discuss that 24 hours. Think of all of the sort of one-day stories that we can't even remember anymore, but they were so hot for that minute. And some of them did make it to the nightly news. Wearing a flag pin. I noticed in the debate the other night, Senator McCain did not wear a flag pin. So the whole issue of the role of new media, I think, is getting more attention this time. That doesn't include the humor side of it, the Jon Stewart, the Daily Show. How many of you watch the Daily Show? Yes, about half. Stephen Colbert. You've got, as far as campaigns go, you've got blogging, you've got text messaging, you've got Facebook, MySpace. All of these things now are part of the whole campaign apparatus. And one of the things that has hurt McCain he's been slower on the uptake on this. I saw a survey this morning conducted, I think, by NBC Wall Street Journal of new voters. And those folks who are hooked on new media are 2-1 Obama. Whether they show up to vote remains to be seen, but they're there. You get, if you're into this thing, you can go to your iPhone and you can get all kinds of updates. Let's see if I have anything new different right now. Well, Political Wire this morning had a whole bunch of stuff on who's ahead and who's behind. But in fact, I got an email from iPhone. It talks to me. And it said, it's obvious you're interested in politics, check out this site. Well, I mean, you know, how did it know? And then I've got a couple more things to say, then we'll have some questions. The other thing is this word change. Obama started it. Everybody else has chimed in that people are hungry for change. I mean, the truth is, we're all for change as long as you don't mess with my stuff. You can mess with somebody else's stuff. So when Hillary came out and said, healthcare reform, universal healthcare, everybody will have to have it, she took great pains to say, but you can keep what you have if you like it. Don't mess with my stuff. Obama's a plan, which is not quite as mandatory as hers, makes the same case. You know, you don't have to switch. You can stay with what you have. But this is what we're going to do if you don't have some, and how we might be able to facilitate you getting some. I saw a birthday card the other day with a big picture of Obama on it, and one of those, you know, one of his thoughts, a cartoon bubble, and it said, he's about to go out on stage to make a speech, and he says, should I be for change and then hope? Or maybe hope first and then change. Maybe I can do hope and change together. You know, so it's become almost a cliche. Then Senator McCain says, wait a minute, we're for change too. As he talks about the British, the Normandy invasion and Eisenhower's 2 letters, which weren't quite correct. His interpretation of that second letter wasn't exactly right. He said that Eisenhower, second letter, in case it was not a success, that he would resign. Actually, he didn't say that. It said he would take responsibility, but it fit his narrative that he wanted the guy at the SEC to resign. At any rate, there are differences in how they mean change. Obama means change really from a public policy perspective. He means change when it comes to specific policies like healthcare, like an energy strategy, like the war, like maybe U.S. image in the world. McCain is, in a way, arguing, if we take him at his word, and I do, is arguing for systemic change. If he is authentic in what he wants, the kind of change he's advocating, I think, is much more seismic. He's talking about changing the K Street mentality. K Street, in his view, would no longer exist. Pork, earmarking, that kind of thing would be gone. Projecting American power would be a given, and we would drill, baby, drill. But for McCain, he seems to argue that the bad guys, who just happen to be on his campaign staff, that's the problem with his message. The bad guys, the K Street crowd, are really the ones that have mucked up our system. And if somehow that can be addressed, the political system can be made whole. And I think people will agree with that message. The problem is, you know, what do you do when your campaign, it seems to be, this is not to say that Obama is not pure here at all. But how do you make claims here when your campaign manager, you know, has been a professional lobbyist? When the next 2 or